Yeah, we can see it.
All right. Let me go to the Matillion instance. We would go to our project default. Okay. So we had briefly seen that how we can use Matillion to how we can use Postman to get the data from any of the APIs, including Matillion. So we will see that how we can get the information of Matillion API, how we can call the jobs from here. It provides certain functionalities like user config, audit, all these endpoints. So uh, through Postman, I mean, we know that Postman is a, a application which we can use to call APIs, get the details of API, and even we can create the API here. But that is out of scope as of now for us because we are trying to see how we can call the Matillion APIs. So let me start that. So initially when we landed here, uh, before that I want to talk about one more thing, and that would be how uh, how many ways are there by which we can schedule a job which is already created in Matillion. So Matillion provides us inbuilt scheduler. So this is a scheduler which is provided internally by Matillion, which lets us run the jobs at a certain time, whatever which we have set, and it runs the job accordingly. So most of the organization, like big organizations, use a third-party scheduler which runs the job periodically as we want it, either 1 hour or half an hour or one day or weekly. So all those functionalities can be done by a third-party scheduler for the bigger projects. But when we are not having the bigger projects, we can even use the inbuilt functionalities of Matillion to schedule the jobs. So generally, we can do it by a few ways. One is by using the internal Matillion scheduler, or secondly, by calling the jobs in the orchestration jobs only, like listing the jobs there and then calling them one by one, or we can do it through the APIs. Okay, so first we are checking that how we can do it from Matillion itself. So here we see the manage schedule. So it is nothing but a scheduler which lets us schedule a job here. So we simply create a schedule uh, and then we just name it and give our time zones, give the versions. So we are working on default version. Then all of the jobs which are there in this can you see are here. So as you see, it is only showing the orchestration job because we can only call the orchestration jobs only, and we can put our transformation jobs inside the orchestration job. So once we run that orchestration job, whatever the transformation jobs are there in that job will also be triggered. So we can just set these times up, and we can set that when we want to run it every day, days of month, or just in a month, like in a certain days or days of week, which all week we want. And we can set a time that, okay, this time we want to run it, and at this minute we want to run the job, set the version, job, and environment. And if we are going to set it up, we can create a schedule and run the job. So that is one way of scheduling the Matillion job. If we talk about another way of doing it, then let's say we have we have this orchestration job. Okay, and remove these components. So in orchestration job component, we have these run orchestration and run transformation components. So if we just pull them, make a connectivity between them, then inside one job only, we can call any number of orchestration and transformation jobs. So in the component, we can provide which all job we want to run here. So we don't have any other orchestration job in our folder. This one is an orchestration job. So let's set it up. And if there are any variables, we can provide those details as well. So we are not having any of them as of now. So we'll skip it. Similarly for grid variables. And similarly, when we talk about a run transformation component, we can call any of the transformation job. So as you see, the list is big because we have more transformation jobs in this project. So we can call any of the jobs here. And similarly, we can use one more component and after that, one more component. So we can create a pipeline of the jobs or the workflows already created. And simply by running this test org job, we'll be able to run all of these jobs inside. So this is the second way. So first way was creating the schedules, individual schedules for the jobs. In that individual schedule also, we can call this high level orchestration job only. So whatever jobs are there inside, those will be called. And if we don't want them to be scheduled, we can just simply run this orchestration job and whatever orchestration and transformation job it is having inside will be running. So this is the second way. And third way is we can do it through the Postman or curl. So we have two functionalities. The Postman is the GUI based API configuration tool, whereas curl is the command line. So here we are concentrating mostly on Postman. So through Postman also, we can call this high level orchestration job. So whatever jobs inside this high level orchestration job, be it orchestration jobs or transformation job, will be called. So these are a few ways by which we can schedule our jobs in Matillion and run them as per the requirement. Okay. So let's go and see talk about Postman. So we have briefly discussed that how we can call Matillion APIs through Postman. We can call any API. So similarly, Matillion also provides us this functionality that you can call the Matillion API directly from the Postman, and then you can trigger jobs, you can schedule them, you can get the audit information, you can get the user information. All of those functionalities can be done through Postman. So we're going to discuss that. Before that, I mean, I want to let you guys know that Matillion has upgraded their API. There used to be version 0.1, but that has been deprecated now, and they are only concentrating on newer version, which is Matillion version 1. Okay, so let me go and create a new connection. Okay.
And Shuman, meanwhile, can I ask one doubt?
Yeah, please.
That second method which you told, so in that we cannot schedule it, right? Like in the first
No,
method
we
we can
cannot
schedule.
schedule it. So
Yeah,
we can add the number of jobs here, but we can use the scheduler to run this job. So whatever jobs are inside this component will be
yeah.
scheduled through the scheduler. Okay.
Okay, okay. Yeah, yeah. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay. All right. So we'll go to Postman. Okay, take this. No, we don't want this. We want to create a new connection. So I'll create new HTTP request. Okay. Now what I want is the URL which we are using to access the Matillion. So that is this URL, IP address. So I give this one, and we know that we can call only the REST APIs through Postman. So there's a format to mention it as REST and V1. So once we have set the URL correctly, we'll try to do a send. And whatever is the output will be seen here. So it is saying could not make the connection. And we can do view and see that why it failed. So it is saying error get e not found. So what does that mean is that if you see the URL, it is wrong. So we have HTTP twice. So we may want to remove this because this is not the correct one. And we'll do a send again and check what it is showing. So it has came as unauthorized here. If you see this unauthorized, that means the connection was not made. So there are certain codes which API call gives. So those are common ones are 200 and 401. So 200 means that the connection is made successfully, whereas the 401 means that the authorization was not successful. So what is missing here? I mean, can anybody tell me that why we got this unauthorized access?
Your that username, password, or something like that, maybe.
Correct, correct. You got it. So we may want to set them up before calling the API. So I told you guys that uh, there are several ways to make a API connection, and that depends on that particular API owner that how they want that API to be accessed. So Matillion has set it up as simple basic authentication. So they want us to give, provide the username credentials, username and password credentials, which we are using to access that Matillion instance. So I have already used this API, so it is already showing. Otherwise, you can put yours. So it is now having the username connection. So we'll again try to do a send. And we have got a 200 code. That means that the HTTP request was successful. So what does that mean is that the postman is now able to make the connection to this particular instance of Matillion. And if you see this in JSON, it provides all the functionalities that what all methods we can use, what is the path, what are the credentials. Okay, so once this is done, so we know how we can access the API. So I was talking about V0 and V1. So if you see, I have given V0, V1 because that is the API where Matillion has moved it. Earlier it was V0 version, but now they have moved it to V1. So that is why we are accessing V1. Okay. Now, let's say I want to run a specific job which is there in our instance, this instance. So get command is only to get the information from that API. But now when we are saying that we want to run that job in our Matillion instance, so that means we want to post, like we want to send some information to our called API from Matillion. So sorry, from, Postman. So we may want to use a post command here. So let me do a post command. And so these are the informations it basically asks us to provide. If you see, first it wants us to provide instance address, then the group name where our job is, the project name, the version name, job name, and the environment name. So we have to set, in fact, to get all of these details. Uh, So once we have set all of them and we go through a post command, in that case, we would be able to make a particular job run, whatever we have set up here. So let's use this. So till this part we already have, so I will just copy the rest of them and would provide the information. So first it is asking a group name. So what is the group name of our instance? If we are seeing that, so this is the project group, Cloud Data Factory. So I would have to provide that here. Next, it is asking for project name. So let me go back to my instance again and see what is the project name. So we are in test KT project. So that is the information I have to provide in Postman. Second, it is asking for version. So if we see here, uh, we are in the default version. So once we have several versions created of the project, like for example, if you're working on a project and you pull the code from already existing code in production environment and created your own version and working on that, in that case, you would have to provide that like that version name. But for us, it is default as of now. So we would give that version name here, default. Now, job name, which job we want to run. So let's take a job. So we would want to run this job only, test org one. Again, as I have said, that we can only call orchestration jobs from any of the scheduler. So even if we are using a third-party scheduler, even when we are using scheduler, the inbuilt scheduler, or we are using API calls, we can only call the orchestration job. And inside that orchestration job only, we can place our transformation job. So those can only process one by one. So we want to give the detail of this orchestration job. So let's go back to Postman and give the job name, test org one. And then we have give what command we want, that is run, and then environment name, that in which environment this job is. So we know this environment is test underscore KT. So we would give that detail. Yeah. So if you see a parameter is added that, okay, in this environment, you want to run your job. So that parameter automatically added when we added those environment details here. So environment name is a parameter which this API has set. So when we were discussing about API, I had talked that, okay, the API owner provides certain functionalities that how you want to access that API, either by basic credentials or bearer key or API key. And apart from that, they also provide certain parameters which we have to set. So that depends upon the API owners that how they want their API to be accessed. So in that case, in this case, Matillion wants us to provide an environment name, which is that in which environment you'll be running this job. So that is the information we have provided. And we are using a post method because we want to make the changes to that API. So get would be to get the information about that API, but post would be to make any changes in that API. So that is why we are using post. Also, we would check if authorization is in place, otherwise we'll get an error. So we have the authorization in place, all looks good. Let's send this request. All right, so it said that the job is successfully queued. So that means that the API call was successful and it was able to initiate that job. Okay. So we only get the information about the initiation of the job, that the job is running. We don't get the information about whether the job has finished or not. Why? Because this is a post command and we are sending the information to the API. So we are not able to get the details that whether the job has finished or not. That we will have to do through a get command. But before that, we'll go to our Matillion instance and see that whether this job has uh, started running or not. Okay. So we can see here in the task history that the job was initiated. So expand it. All right. So this job has failed because table already exists. But that is not what we are trying to fix as of now. We are trying to see that whether we are able to make a job run through an outside API configuration tool. So that is a success that we were able to trigger this job from the API call, and this job ran and finished. So that's how you can call a job from Postman. Any questions so far? I'll take that as no. So now we want to see that, okay, let's say somebody who is running it doesn't have access to Matillion and they want to know that whether the job, what was the status of the job. So we know because we have seen in Matillion that the job failed. But if we want to see it from here, in that case, we would have to use the get command, and we we want to see whether the job was successful. So we want in the project, and then after that, um, we may have to provide the details about. Before that, we can also see it through the task history, that what was the task history. So recent task history was this, that we ran this job through API. It is showing us previous task history as well, that we manually ran the job. So all of them. So if we want to see the details of the job, that whether the job has successful or finished or failed through the API, then in that case, we would have to use the task ID. So the task ID which we had just got here, mm, task history, this task ID. So we want this task ID 9585. Go to our instance. Sorry, Postman. We go to Postman. So we are in the project name. We have given the project details. So now we will provide task ID, and it is 9385. And now we are using a get command. You know why? Because we want to get that information and do a send. It is saying cannot find a
I
task
think
with
Anshuman, it was 9585.
correct. So we have given the wrong ID. That is why it has failed. So let's do 9585. Awesome. So now we are able to get that, like get those details regarding that job, all of the details, that what type of job it was, what was the group name, what was the project name, what was the version name, the validate orchestration level, because we know first the job has to be validated. So it validated the job, the validation was successful. Then it is executing the orchestration job and is showing status as failed, state failed, because the job has failed. If it was successful, it would have shown a success. And it is also giving the message which we got from that error message, that the table already exists error came. So that's how you can use a Postman to run a job or run a schedule. So if we have created a high level or a orchestration job which is having all the jobs in it, and we want to run it on a project level, we'll be able to do it, and we would be able to get the information about that as well. Make sense? So that's how we can use Postman to schedule our jobs in Material. Any question, guys, so far? No? All right. So let me, apart from that, it also has a lot of other functions, like it provides us the user config information. We can also use it for audit purpose. We can also call the entire task history. Sorry, we can also call the entire task history as well uh, from Postman or curl. So when we are talking about Postman, Postman is a GUI based and we are showing it, but the same functionality can also be done through curl commands. So that's how we can leverage these outside API configuration tools to schedule and get information about our instances of Matillion. Okay, so that's about scheduling in Matillion. It is not very tricky. It's like once we have created the job, we can use any of the scheduler, but that depends also on the requirement and also on the business needs, that how they want their jobs to be scheduled. Okay. Any other question? Sorry, any question, guys?
Like if you want to schedule a job through Postman, so we'll have to go give that command, get command only. If you want to schedule a job through Postman, then how to do it?
We will have to use this command, the get command.
Okay,
Then in Postman also you can uh, you can use the like Postman connectivity with a scheduler. So that scheduler will like trigger this command in Postman periodically, so that the like whatever information we have in that like command will be processed with a time interval, however we want it.
okay. So like we have to change this URL or something like that, right? And then we'll have to do the get command, and it will trigger that scheduler.
Yeah, for triggering it will be post command, but to getting the
Oh,
information,
okay,
whether it has yeah like triggered or not, that would be kept.
got it, Anshu. Thank you.
All right. So this is about scheduling. Let's close it. Now we would want to see that how we can make a connection to an outside API. So for that, we would be interested in we were working with AccuWeather API. So let's so if we want to access any of the APIs which are uh, so far what we have done is that we have called Matillion API through Postman, but now we want to call some APIs from Matillion and get those data from those APIs. So we are going to work with AccuWeather API for an example, but it can be anything. What you need is the same information again. So whatever we did in Postman, we will have to do in Matillion to get AccuWeather API. So in Postman, we like provided information like authorization, proper URLs and all, and make the connection first. Similarly, we would have to do the same from Matillion if we want to access any of the API. So for example, here we have AccuWeather API. So for that, we first want to create our own connector to that API. So this is manage API profile. So here we have two options, manage query profile and manage extract profile. So query profile is used when we have a certain API which has already given us data in terms of JSON or like XML, and we want to access that. But if we have been not given any details, like what sort of data is going to be there in that API, but we want that data uh, through our own connector. So then we would use manage extract profile. So in this case, AccuWeather, we see that it has not directly given us whether the API is uh, having the JSON or XML. It has just given us the like API address and certain uh, parameters to access that, like API key or bearer code or basic authorization. So in that case, we would have to use manage API extract profile. So let me click it. So manage basic API like extract profile. What we have to do is we have to create our own connector to that external API. Okay, so I would try to do that. So to do it, IQ weather. That's our profile name. We have created it. So now it has opened that connection. So it is kind of similar to what we had here. In a way, it is similar because here also we were doing the same thing. We were calling Matillion, we were calling Matillion API. So similarly here from Matillion, we are going to call the AccuWeather or like not the full API, a certain API in AccuWeather. So we would have to make that connection. So that connection, so create new endpoint. Endpoint name, we would name it as weather. We can give a description, country wise. So now you see here also we have the same get and post. So Postman is a API configuration tool only. So it provides a lot of options which we can, like perform on external APIs. But Matillion, it only provides us get or put to, sorry, get and post. So either we can get the information from an external API or we can do certain changes on that API. Only two methods are here. So we want to get the details of that like AccuWeather API. So we would go with get, and we have that. So this is one API inside AccuWeather API which we want to call. So it's inside locations. So here if you go API reference, locations API. So I have used one of them here from here. So if you see the address, we are here in data service AccuWeather.com, locations, version 1, and all of these. And if you see in this curly braces, this is nothing but a parameter. So when we called the Matillion API from uh, Postman, there was a like one parameter we had to set, that was the environment name. Similarly, this API wants us to set this country code. So let me do a send. It is saying that the URI parameter country code must have a value. That means that this parameter is there. It has already came as parameter because Matillion was able to see the URL and see that, okay, this API wants this parameter to be satisfied first before it can be called. So country code has already came. Sometime it is not there, then in that case, we can add parameters by our own. Okay, but in this case, we have it. So let's give the value Great Britain. So we have set the parameter. Let's send. We got a 401 code. That means that the authorization was unsuccessful. So we'd go with the same approach what was suggested by Arnav, that we have not set the authorization. So we will have to set the authorization. Now there are certain APIs which doesn't ask for authorization. In those cases, we can directly provide the get method and the URL and the parameters and send, and we would be able to make the connection. But here, this AccuWeather API wants us to set the authorization. So we would enable it, and you would see that there are a few type of authorization. Basic authorization, which simple ask for username, password, bearer token, which is a token which some APIs provide, that they want that token. They send those individual tokens to the users, and they want those token details to be provided as parameter to access them. Most common one, API key value pair. So there, they certain APIs provide these as as like authorization credentials, that they want these keys and the values to be there. So, and open authorization. So open authorization is even more secure, and that is used by Google, Facebook, Twitter, and all those connectivities. So in our case, AccuWeather API, what does it ask for? Let us check. So it is saying that you have to sign up to access weather API endpoints. So I have already signed up, so I'll just log in. So I've logged in, and now if I want to access the key, so what it does is that it asks you to create your apps. It's just a functionality this API has provided, that you first make uh, a simple application inside the URL or this web application only, that what all details you want. So I wanted location API detail, so I had set it up and created a new app here. You can you can create a separate one with whatever information you want. You want minute, cast API details, and all of that can be done. But for this example, we'll just take the location API one. So if you see here, it has provided us the API key. So this is very important to access the API from Matillion. So it wants us to use API key value pair. So API key. And what type of parameter it is? It is not a header parameter. It is a query parameter. Those information also you will get it from the APIs only. From different API has like different type of functionality. Some want it as a header parameter. Some want it as query. AccuWeather has specified it as a query API. So now we have set these information. We have set parameter. We have set authorization. We don't really have anything on the body. So let's send and see what is the response. So we are able to validate and we are able to get this JSON from that API. So it has provided us all of those details which were there. So whatever information was having uh, in this API, admin areas for each countries, we are able to see. So it is having an ID, a localized name, and country, and other details for this admin areas of this location API. So we are able to make the connection and we are able to get the status code as 200, which means that the API call was successful. So we go next. So when we go next, API like Matillion uh, checks that what sort of data this API is having. So it is having all of these columns and we want to use all of them. So we'll go next. And that's how you create your own connector. If you finish it, we are able to create a weather endpoint. Like we have an endpoint to this API. Now we can access the data, whatever there on this particular API. Okay. So we see the AccuWeather has been configured and this connector is created. So whenever we want to use the data, whatever there in this API, we can access it. If it gets updated on the API level, we will still be able to make the connection unless they change the connectivity rules that they want to go with some other way. Instead of bearer key, they like instead of API key, they want to go with bearer key or they want to go with basic like basic authorization. If those things changes, we may have to again come back here and change them. Or we'll create a new endpoint to this API and we'll be able to access it. Any question, guys, on how to creating an own uh, like external creator connector to extract the profiles?
Anshuman, yeah, Anshuman, it is only possible only for those who don't have any other authorizations. है ना? Yeah.
Uh,
But if someone has the, uh, if someone need authorization, then what will we do?
so let's say you want to have authorization to some API. So mm, every API, whichever is there, like be it, so we were facing an issue with Google AdWords. So Google AdWords API, for example, every API. So what is the use of API? API wants us to use the data whichever there in that particular application. So they will provide us certain authorization that, okay, if you have all of these informations, you can access them. There are some APIs which will not provide any authorization because those are open sources and they want them to be used by everyone. In those scenario, we will not have to set all of these details. But if we want to access a certain API and that certain API has set certain rules that, okay, if you want to access us, you need to have those credentials ready. So they will only provide these details. So if you're asking that how will we get these API keys and all, they will only provide it because that's how you can access their API. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Yeah. But
Sure. All right. So now that we have made the connection, now, okay, the connection is made, but how will we call this data inside our Matillion staging and how will we load it to Snowflake? We have to see that as well, right? So for that, like For that as well, again, we would have to create an orchestration job. Why? Because we are extracting the data from that API. So whenever extraction is there, orchestration job. So we'd create an orchestration job. Mm, AccuWeather API extract. So we created this new job. We see a start component. That means it's an extraction orchestration job. Now we would search for API related component. So we have created an API extract. So we would use API extract component and we would set this component's properties up. So let's update the name. AccuWeather API profile is AccuWeather. That is what we have set. So now we can use that. Data source is weather. If you remember, we have given weather as this as the endpoint name and country code. We have only called it for one. We can also add another like more parameters here, and we can have those details as well. So that is done. API key name, it was API key and API key value. So we may have to go back here and copy this key. So all of these properties you would have to set before you may able to use it. So it is asking whether you have saved it in the password manager. We have not saved it, so we will store it in component only for now. But in future, if you'll be working, you may have to create a password manager so that the API is not directly accessible. But this is a test for learning only, so we would just store it in component. Then the S3 bucket detail where we want to stage this. So I'll give my entrance and the target table of Snowflake where you want to create it. So weather location. So we are able to make this connection. This component properties are set. So we will run the job.
Anshuman, that AccuWeather table you have already created in Snowflake or what?
No, I've not created it. It will only create it.
By taking the like column values and deciding the
So for
uh
now, I mean, it is a JSON file, right? So whatever, so I will so
okay.
now it's a JSON file. So it will be just one column having entire data. So we would have to
Okay.
flatten that data if you know that
Yeah,
functionality
yeah,
in
correct.
Snowflake. So we would
Yeah,
have to
yeah,
flatten it and separate it. Then it would be able to see.
yeah,
So
yeah,
if you
got it.
see loaded one page into the table because it was entire one uh, like JSON file which has been loaded. So now we would
Like
have to handle that
flatten.
semi-structured data. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Got it, Anshuman. Thank you.
Yeah. No worries. So yeah, that's how we can create our own connectors and call those connectors in our job. So now after this, once we have flattened that data, we have handled that like semi-structured data. We can process it and use it as per our requirement. But the important part is that how you make a connection to an external API connector and use it into your Matillion instance. So this is how it is done. Any question on this, guys? No? All right. So next is, so we saw here there were two profile. One was extract profile and one is like query profile. So extract profile we know we use when we don't know that what sort of data that API is going to have, and we don't have that connector as well. But now we will see that how we can use managed query profile. So managed query profile is used when we know that there is certain API which is already given us data in the form of like JSON or XML. So I have a handy example that is this one, CoinDesk. So CoinDesk has provided us uh, this URL which is having the JSON data already here. Okay, so if it is already having this data, in that case, how are we going to create a new connection for this? We're going to see that. So we'd go with manage query profile. Again, we'll create a new connection. CoinDesk. It has came here. We'll configure it. So it is asking for a file. So sample file. And we have that file in our local system. So I will just copy that file, browse and copy that file and next. So this is the data which that API is having, this one. So we are able to get that data here. We validate it. Validation successful. Finish. So here I can able to see it. If I test it, it's not having any of the tables in it. That's why it's not able to show that the like list of tables in this API because it's all a JSON data. It's not flattened yet, so we are not able to see it. So similarly, we have the file now. Now we'll create an endpoint for it. So we would name it as join CoinDesk. And it is asking which sample file you want to use. We are going to use the current price sample file. Next. So it has already given us that there's no parameter needed. So we'd go next. All of these detail we want. So we got all of these details here and we will do a finish. So it has saved a RSD file. So RSD file is the connection of this API and the like JSON file is the real file here. So we are able to make this connection through that file which we were having, the sample file which was provided by the API provider. So we use that sample file to make a endpoint to connection here. In the previous case, we were not having that sample file. We didn't know what sort of data is going to be there. So we created our own connector. But here we use that sample file as a reference and created a connector. And now again, we can use those details in this API query component. So for API extract would be for the extracted APIs. But if we will use API query component, we'd be able to access the details inside that, inside this API. Okay. We can set it up. It's going to be same as this. So we'll be able to do it. So that's how you can access a different type of APIs. First, how you access like Matillion API from an external source, and second, how you access external APIs inside Matillion. So these are the two topics which we have discussed. And apart from that, we have also discussed that how we are going to be scheduling the jobs inside Matillion. So any questions on this, guys? No? All right. So what's next? What can we discuss next? Let me open the slides. So we have discussed all of these things. APIs are interface to talk to different application. Makes it easier for us to like develop and use those information inside our applications. Different call. So pre-built connection, we saw that the query-based connection was a pre-built connection, and we also built our own connection. So we can do it for any of the public API, which lets us access it, considering that we have all the authorization details with us. So generally, whenever we are doing a API call, these are the operations which are happening. We are setting up the endpoint. We are exploring the payload, whatever data it is having. We are picking the component and starting to inject it inside our staging area, and then we can work on it and transform it. We explored Postman. All right. Any question, guys, on the topics which we have discussed today?
No, Anshuman, it's clear.
All right. Any doubts from the previous sessions or so far which you have faced about Matillion in general, or any of the components which we discussed, or any functionalities?
Anshuman, that iterators and all that we'll be discussing it in later sessions.
Yeah, we will discuss them.
Okay, okay.
So we will have one more session. I mean, we have one more session, right? So, or we are not having
No,
scheduled.
we don't. I guess we don't have. I don't know. Like
No, actually, it is scheduled till today, but
Acha, okay.
we can have
No, we
tomorrow
will
also.
schedule one more session tomorrow. Yeah,
yeah,
we'll
yeah,
have.
yeah.
We'll cover the iterators, and we'll also talk about the variables which we have not talked. So we just talked about job variables, the job level variables, that how we can create a job variable and use that. But we will also talk about grid variables and environment variables. I mean, like theoretically, we have talked about it, but we will see in practical as well. In this job, we didn't have any, but I think in this job we created some.
Anshuman, just one thing, like the JSON
Oh,
files could be flattened through Matillion, like by using transformation or something.
yeah, that is also a possibility. We'll discuss that as well tomorrow. So
Okay.
I'll just note it
Yeah.
down.
Yeah. Anshuman, I think we have to shift our class for tomorrow, I think, from 5, because tomorrow we have a monthly connect.
Oh, okay. No issues, guys. We can do it. So everybody will be there on the monthly connect. So all of you guys are available at 5, right?
Yes, Anshuman.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
All right. All right. So yeah, we'll have at 5, and we will discuss uh, the remaining topics there. Okay.
Sure, sure.
Sure.
All right. So I think we are good for today's session. Uh, I'm sorry for joining late, but I guess we covered what I had planned for today. So we are good to close the session for today,
Is
unless you
this
guys have
is
any
this
doubt.
session is this session recorded? Like, did anyone
Yeah,
record?
it's recorded. It's
Okay.
recording. Ankit is recording. So any question, guys, or we are good to wind up?
We are good to wind up, man, from my side. Thanks.
All right, Shubham was not there. They would be able to access the recording. All right, guys, thank you very much. Appreciate you guys joining it, and we'll have a session tomorrow as per your